Hi, welcome. We'll just get started now. I wanted to start off by introducing the discussion today. My name is Payam Sharifi. I'm one of the founders of Slavs and Tatars. And as you know, we're probably we're the guest curators of this year's edition of the Asia Now Fair, with a focus on Central Asia and artists from Central Asia who use textiles. And our participation in this fair wouldn't have been possible with my colleague who's here with us today, who is the director of a space called Tselinny Center for Contemporary Culture. It's as much as a platform as it is an institution, which dates from which year? 2018. So fifth year already. It works as a platform in the sense that it's equally based, and I think one of the reasons why we've been so, seduced by Tselinny's model is that it's equally emphasizing questions of knowledge production, art historiography of the region, local support of artists, as well as, of course, larger regional questions. That it's not purely an institution devoted only to Kazakhstan, of course, but what the larger region means. And that region is something we'll talk, Jama Nurkalayeva, who's the director of Tselinny, she'll talk a bit more about. That this is, of course, it's a form of sort of fanning out the region, not just to mean Central Asia, but also what it means for Central Asia's relationship with the Near East, of course, between China and Russia, as we know, but also more extensively with the Middle East, with Turkey, and others. Tselinny Center for Contemporary Culture runs, as I mentioned, educational programs as well as exhibitions at its temporary space currently in Almaty, which is, I would say, the cultural capital of Kazakhstan and probably the capital of contemporary culture of the region, with a very important historical artist-run spaces over the past sort of 4 or 5 decades. And it will be moving into a new space, actually an old space which is being renovated, and I'll let Jama talk more about this. So please join me in welcoming Jama Nurkalayeva from Almaty.
Thank you so much for your warm intro, and hello, dear guests. It's a pleasure to be here today and talk about what we do. Actually, I'm not gonna be very long because Payam already said about our activities. So, of course, basically we wanted to speak about everything we do from our perspective, from a very local perspective, because we call ourselves a regional institution. And of course, the main focus is to develop artistic creation in the region and also support scholars and academics to get together and actually enhance the intellectual communities. This is a very interesting map. We call it the mental map. It actually gives a little breakdown of where we are located and how we're related to all the neighbors we have. So pretty much, as Payam said, it's not only China and Russia around us. So you can see that we are very well centered in the whole region. And so we're surrounded by different cultures that influence our today life from economical, political, cultural perspectives. And of course, you know that this place where we live is very complex due to different historical layers, which you may be aware of. But still, it's very important to say how it's reflecting actually this crossroads of ideas. And I assume that not a lot of people actually know where is Kazakhstan, so that's why we call this presentation about it. But really, to be honest, we talk about the institutional work in the region, and it's very important to say that for the last 30 years of independency, first 15 years, first decade was mostly operated by international foundations such as Soros and Goethe Institute. And then since the last 15 years, we have a lot of local initiatives such as Eurasian Cultural Alliance, IADA, also Aspan Gallery, and now we are kind of evolving into this kind of institutional level. So we have 2 institutions coming, and one of them is Tselinny. So this institution is privately founded by Kazakh businessman Kairat Boranbayev. As Payam said, we are aiming to actually move into our new space, which is under reconstruction for the last 4 years. And it is actually a modernist cinema of 64, as you can see here on the left. And it was completely destroyed in the years of 2000 with the owner of that period, that he decided actually to transform it into multifunctional space. And he created a nightclub over there and a pizza space. And so it was, for these years, it was more, let's say, relevant. And of course, understanding that the historical layers of the building are kind of lost, but we still had the actually possibility to preserve some of them. So we kept the original auditorium, and we also kept the original artwork that's been in. It is a Soviet monumental arts graffiti by Evgeny Sidorkin. So it's going to be in a form getting back to the building that we're developing with architect Asif Khan. Actually, it's very interesting because we're keeping the name Tselinny, which is absolutely having a colonial history and knowledge and meaning, but still with the reflection on how we're changing the space architecturally and also the infrastructurally, the whole district. We think that probably we have a little chance to decolonize this idea of this name, Tselinny, and give it and fill it with another meaning.
And give a sense of scale. It was the largest cinema in the Soviet Union at the time, right? It's massive.
Yeah, it is massive. It was for 1,300 seats. So it was like this festivals, I don't know, like mostly for the biggest premieres and this kind of stuff. And the institution itself, of course, for today, it's not really a big one. It's 5,000 square meters, but still, because we're keeping the original shape of the building, so we're not really extending. We're just actually keeping up the whole space for this experiments that we're going to have inside. It's also very interesting to say that we are a horizontal institution, so we don't have the chief curator, we don't have a huge team, we are 15 people. So it's very important to say that we're looking towards the local artistic production, because for our opinion, probably we could have been an institution that are bringing back an international exhibitions and shows and just being like very cool and like imposing what is contemporary art in the world. But for our perspective, for us, it was really important to understand actually where we are since these all years of independence. And I think that for many of us still there is like a lot of questions to digest, you know, like because there is absolutely difficult past, very tragic past that we have to deal with. Also this very interesting present that is affected by many political and cultural issues and economical, of course. And we're reflecting on what is going on with our society constantly, and that's why our program mostly devoted to the research programs. So we have this large scholar in residence program. We also have a publishing program, and we actually try to work mostly with the academics from the region, or the academics who are working with their having in their focus the Central Asian studies. So it's kind of like a very slow and invisible work, probably not really rewardable, but it's, for us, it's a great pleasure to do that. So for this moment, we can really say that we are institutions that is based on two motives, which is culture and research. And as you can see from the research, we have documentation projects. We are collecting the database on contemporary art from 1985 in our region. And as of course, we're not buying the rights. We're not buying out the rights. So we just collecting the data to make it available for the researchers to understand what is online available about artistic production in the region. Also, there is a Horizon online anthology. It's going to be from this year published 2 years per year, two times per year. Sorry. So it is actually an anthology, and it says about, we produce a lot of video essays about Kazakh performance art and many, many interesting topics, because every issue is actually thematic. But it's for free, and it's having a lot of academic essays in there as well. And we publish local scholars. Also, I mentioned already our scholar residence program, and of course the Tselinny publishing, and also it's very important to say that we are understanding that we're kind of an educational platform, but of course it's both for the larger audience and of course for more advanced audiences. So like, let's say for the community audience.
Maybe we pause on, on these two books for a second?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, please.
I will. So these are fantastic books. This one is a book they published last year about Kazakh New Wave cinema. And if you're familiar with the Kazakh New Wave cinema, it was a very important movement in the 90s, right?
Yes, end of 80s.
End of 80s, early 90s, of the influence of New Wave in Kazakh cinema with very important films. And this is a great volume, a kind of anthology of essays and documentation of that. And the newest book is a book of Yevgeny Brusilovsky, who was the dramaturge. Composer, sorry. The composer, a composer sent to kind of found the national Kazakh
Soviet music
opera.
Yeah.
Opera. And so, of course, with all the kind of problematic issues that comes with, they've asked for a scholar who's speaking today, right?
Yeah, Nariman
is speaking later today. Nari did an annotation, so he basically, they published the memoirs of this composer that was written in the 70s with an extensive annotation of sort of contextualizing, of course, what these issues mean in terms of colonization, in terms of settler politics. What does it mean to found a national identity from a occupier, or kind of occupier, but a colonial state? So it's a fantastic resources that really is as Javan's mentioned, is doing crucial work that is really at the kind of cross sections of what universities do, what NGOs do, and what cultural institutions do in the West. We have the luxury of having all three of those in separate institutions, and in Kazakhstan, it's being done, in Central Asia, it's often being done by one or two actors in some sense. Private actors, obviously, not state actors.
Yeah, that's true.
Can I pass it around?
Yeah, please. Yeah, it's also very important to say that, of course, now reflecting our historical knowledge, we have to understand how to move forward, and that's why it's very, very important to actually look into the knowledge and understand how to deal with it, because the position of being a victim, it's really a position of going nowhere. So for us, it's a way to use our imagination and will actually to get over this and to imagine the possible future, and not even maybe one version of it, but different kind of versions with a lot of questions and of course doubts that we all have, but still being a very fragile situation geopolitically. Of course, for us it is very important to raise these intellectual communities and basically gather them together, and actually we invite all of you, if you're interested, to come to Almaty or get online and get together with our resources and data to understand better what is really going on with us. Nariman will later give more of a context about our historical situation, I think, but I'm going to speak a bit more about the institution. Of course, we have these three obvious themes that are kind of like for everyone, but still, if we speak about what applying to our region, you can say that the gender, of course, it's really important, because we have this Islam, and now with the independency, the traditional Islam is getting really, really strong. So it's very interesting position of being having this post-Soviet Islam that we actually don't want to call post-Soviet no longer, but still the condition is very interesting. Also, it relates to the question of the faith, because we have 124 nations living in Kazakhstan, so it's kind of like a multinational country. And of course, we cannot say that the majority of the country, of course, identify themselves as a Muslim, but we can say that it's much more complex. And of course, ecology, when we speak about that, again, we're speaking about our difficult past of the history of Polygon and Kaspandram, Baikonur, and everything that happened with the Cotton Project and Aral Sea. So these kind of themes applicable to our region are looking probably similar to the problems that some countries or some nations are also facing, but still they have been also our very local problematic base. as I mentioned already, so we are looking forward to be very horizontal. So we're not having like a fixed programs. We have commitments that we do throughout the years, and we financing this publishing program and scholar in residence program and research programs. But for the projects that we don't call them exhibitions, but more projects, so we still very fluid. We don't have like a real visual identity. We don't have like this branding and posing us as a huge place, taking an umbrella, you know, like taking everyone together. So we have an advisory board, and advisory board is a very important company of people and professionals that we respect so much, and we actually in a constant dialogue thinking about how and what to do within the activities of Tselinny. And for us, advisory board being not a decisive company, but more like of, yeah, as I said, as a dialogue in partners. So yeah, we think this model probably gives us more capacity of not being influenced just only by taste or opinion of one or two curators. So we kind of like open to embrace different kind of thoughts and questions that might appear. Also here you have this kind of like a visual diary of what we do like and what we think maybe not really interesting for us, but still you can have a look. This year we had this scholar in residence program, so we invited 6 scholars to Almaty, so they all met our communities, and it was done through the open call, but we had mostly scholars and artists. It was amazing to see that the audience is really embracing the meeting, the academics, but still we see that we don't see so much artists in this audience, so we hope that artists will come over more to see what academics are thinking about our history and our future. So this is our actual goal. Yeah, so we're inviting you to come over to Kazakhstan next year. not the Nowruz of 21st, so for the opening of our institution, and of course we will be happy to support any of ideas and projects that might be here among you professionals. I assume you're all professionals here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to open it up to questions, of course, to the public, but just to focus pause one moment on what Jama mentioned just moments ago, that the opening, I think, is very important, that it's happening in March of 21st of 2025. For those of you who are familiar with what Nowruz is, it's people, again, what we're trying to do is not just decenter, as Catherine David was mentioning, deterritorialize or decolonize discourses that have been so Russian-focused over the past 100 years or more, but also in the same way it's important to decentralize Iran from this region as well, in the sense that when we think of Persianate cultures or cultures that Central Asia is largely Turkic speaking, but of course Nowruz is something which emanates all the way across the region. So Uzbeks, Kazakhs, and it's a different way of thinking about the region beyond nation states, which I think is just a very boring, reductive, not very productive way to think about these things. So just the fact that it's happening on Nowruz, I think, is a fantastic moment to do that, and I'm looking forward to the space opening. Does anybody have questions?
Is Nowruz the Persian New Year, incidentally?
It's the New Year of...
yeah, that's what I thought. Oh, everybody, yes. Yes.
Essentially, it's pre-Islamic New Year of the region.
Yes.
The 21st of March was, of course, the first day of spring. For the first day of spring, so it's something which is beyond the kind of Iran-focused thing. It's you find it in Azerbaijan, you find it in Turkey, all the way through.
Fortunately, I knew the name.
To Uyghurs as well, of course.
I want to ask you though about the translation of the name Tselinny as Virgin Lands, because my own privileged engagement with Kazakhstan via Aliya Bakayeva means that I know this fantasy of it being a virgin land, the fantasy even, you know, to do with Israel and at the moment is this fantasy of a virgin land that you can take up. So surely, although you said you wanted to fill the name of the center with new meanings, surely that meaning in the word etymologically is a very heavy meaning, and I would be interested to know if there have been any debates about changing the name as opposed to filling a name that's so full of problems with new meanings.
We do have, a lot of problems with the meaning, and of course it was a heavy decision for us to keep the name, actually, because it's much easier to change the name and then pretend that we don't have these problems and say, okay, so it was not there, so we're a completely new institution, we have new architecture, we have new chairs and new video projectors, so we are not about that. So I think it would be more of that perspective that we're having, that, as I said, we're trying and maybe being very happy to have this choice, actually, or maybe the opportunity to raise this conversation and also to give a different knowledge to it. So probably, this is the debate.
I mean, also just to further build on what John was mentioning, even just as, of course, as we've mentioned, just the language itself is problematic, right? Is that the use of a Russian term is something that, again, I think it's very similar to monuments, as John mentioned. Instead of necessarily taking monuments down, I think this is an occasion for us to readdress the role of monuments, as opposed to sort of erasing a history, but readdressing that history. And I think that it's important to also note that Tselinny's focus is first and foremost, this is the first international outing for Tselinny. So this is the first time they've been outed as an organization. That shows in 5 years the focus they've had regionally, and which is very important. And I think that the insistence on the name is also one to build on a tradition that the citizens of Almaty know very well, right? So it's also, it's less violent way of addressing the history, as opposed to, let's say, it'd be easy to create a new name that would then be much more of a rupture, but not necessarily. You might actually lose a lot of your, what I call your lay citizens, who are not your art audience, you know?
Interesting.
Any other questions? There's a lot of Kazakhs in the room. I'm sure there's some interesting questions from our...
Okay, if there's no questions, so we can pass the word to Nariman,
No?
so we
Okay.
can